President has received the Council's position from its first reading, also the reasons behind adoption of that, and the positions and opinions of the Commission have also been received. The complete title of this will be published in the minutes of today's session. The 3-month deadline that the Parliament has starts today, the 17th of March 2023. Then we have a further announcement. Following the resignation of Mr. Eric Andrieux, and on the proposal of the Committee on Legal Affairs, Parliament takes note of the vacancy of his seat from the 2nd of June 2023. In accordance with the rules of procedure, will inform the national authority concerned thereof. Okay, that brings us on to the agenda for today. First of all, on our agenda, we have the European Citizens Initiative, Save Bees and Farmers towards a bee-friendly agriculture for a healthy environment. We will start with Mr. Eickhout for the Environment Committee. You have the floor, sir.
Vielen Dank. Thank you, Madam Chair, and good morning to you all. We are discussing today a European Citizens Initiative that got more than 1 million verified signatures. And the title of that initiative is Save the Bees, where everyone is, of course, very much concerned about, but I think also very important, Save the Farmers. And for very sure, I know that we will have a discussion again about our farming model, but what the citizens are aiming for here also is by changing our agricultural model, we can save the bees and the farmers at the same time. And for me, that is always a pretty strange part of the discussion that I have here in this House when we are discussing agriculture. I don't meet anyone who is happy with the developments in our agriculture system. We see that young farmers are more and more reluctant to get into this business. We see that less and less farmers are there and that they're getting bigger and bigger, but that the profits are shrinking. So no one is really happy with the current agriculture model. Doesn't that mean we need a substantial change that benefits the farmer, but also benefits our natural system, which our agriculture system is built upon? And that is exactly what this initiative is trying to put forward. And that's also a call to the Commission to do now something about the change of our agriculture system. And of course, the Commission launched its Farm to Fork initiative, which, by the way, was very well supported by this House as well. But now the question is, what are we going to do with the Farm to Fork ambition? Yes, there is one file out, that is the sustainable use of pesticides, and you see already, and probably some colleagues will mention that again, there is not full support for that proposal, and some even want to get rid of it. That would mean there is nothing of the Farm to Fork strategy then on the table. Then what's your plan? You will stick to business as usual with the model you're not happy about. So something needs to change, and this is really a question to the Commission. What are you going to propose to change? Not strategies, not initiatives, not nice reports, but laws to change, to make us less dependent on pesticides, fertilizers, antibiotics, because that's the model that needs to change for the bees and the farmers. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. The next speaker on behalf of the Agriculture Committee, Mr. Linz.
President, Commissioner, dear colleagues, bees are an essential part of our ecosystem. Without bees, there's no food. But farmers are also an important part of our ecosystem. Without them, there's no harvest, there's no food. And so for that reason, it is important that we work together with them, with all of the farmers. We need to talk about practical, implementable solutions. We need to work together with the farmers in cooperation and not in confrontation, because we're going to have to make decisions. If we are too idealistic, then we won't achieve the objectives that we've set. The European Citizens Initiative, Save Bees and Farmers Towards a Bee-Friendly Agriculture, shows how important this matter is to European citizens. But the question is, how can we protect bees and farmers in the long term? And I can only say that is something we can do with dialogue. We need alternatives. and we have to come up with these alternative substances, and then we can talk about reduction. And we need the Commission to be on board with this. And when we're talking about biodiversity and how we maintain or improve biodiversity, then we have to talk about family businesses. Many of them complain that they're being pushed into the background and that farmers are stopping. But there are lots of demands on them, documentation, that mean that smaller farmers simply stop farming and that there's no future generation taking on the farms. And in my region, Baden-Württemberg, we are trying to take the path of cooperation. We have legislation on biodiversity, and I think that the Commission should have a look at this in more detail, because at the moment we're in a bit of a dead end.
Thank you very much. Now, Ms. Miranda for the Petitions Committee.
Obrigada, Presidente. Thank you very much, President, Commissioner. First and foremost, I should like to congratulate those who took the initiative for the Citizens Initiative. It is absolutely a success, and on behalf of the Petitions Committee, we would like to offer you our support. More than 1 million citizens stated that this is a priority for European citizens. Therefore, we need to make sure that we follow up on these important initiatives of citizens' participation in participative democracy, and that is the case in terms of the organization of this. They made a request to us that we would have more done to save bees and farmers, to support our environment, and to make sure that we have healthy food and a healthy environment. They made a request for us to make sure that we bolster our policies to better protect farmland, to make sure that they are a driving force in biodiversity protection. Support to farmers is needed, as is support for the environment, biodiversity, farming, supporting small farms, SMEs, sustainable and organic farming, research and development for pesticide-free farming as well as GMO-free farming. The petitioners pointed, for example, to the importance of making sure that we restore our ecosystems. Now, we support a full protection of bees and other pollinators that are currently suffering a dangerous decline, one that is underscored in Europe, but around the world as well. Many bee species are under threat. The populations are falling. Some 80% and some 40% are at risk of endangerment. This decline is due to several things. And the European Citizens Initiative is a great opportunity for the EU to take strong measures to stem this decline in the population. Farmers in Galicia very much are requesting this type of support, and we support it as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now we come to the Commissioner who's been mentioned. We'd like to welcome Commissioner McGuinness this morning. Thank you for being here. You have the floor, Madam.
Madam President. Good morning, colleagues. Like the farmers of Europe, we're up early and having this really important debate, and for obvious reasons I'm very happy to be taking this very important debate. This European Citizens Initiative is talking about saving bees and farmers, and we've heard very strong contributions from the Environment Committee, the Agriculture Committee and the Petitions Committees. So I want to congratulate the members of those relevant committees for a very successful public hearing in January on this topic, because it allowed the organisers to present their initiative and for members to express their views. And I think today's plenary debate is also about exchanging views on this topic. It also shows that the European Citizens Initiative can be very much agenda setting, and it allows citizens to shape the public debate on critical issues for the European Union. Our citizens are increasingly concerned about the use of pesticides and the build-up of pesticide residue in the environment. Society as a whole, including farmers, want to see less pesticide use and lower risks. We also saw this in the calls from the Conference on the Future of Europe and indeed other European citizens' initiatives. We anticipate that the recently updated EU rules for approving microorganisms for use in plant protection will facilitate more access to biological alternatives to chemical pesticides. We also need to acknowledge that farmers need workable alternatives to allow them to continue to supply consumers with food. In addition, the revision of the EU Pollinators Initiative adopted in January and the upcoming revision of the bee guidance document for pesticide risk assessment will boost protection for bees and wild pollinators. Recent analysis carried out by the JRC shows that biodiversity loss is a major threat to EU food security. It already affects our agriculture sector, with potentially irreversible impacts in Europe and globally. We have lost so much nature already that just protecting what we have is no longer an option. We really have to step up efforts, not only to preserve, but also to restore nature and to reverse biodiversity loss. This will help to improve essential ecosystem services like pollination and pest control. Honourable members, you will decide on 2 Commission proposals on the regulation on nature restoration and the regulation on the sustainable use of plant protection products. I would ask you to keep this citizens' initiative in mind in your decisions. European citizens expect an ambitious outcome and substantial progress in the transition towards sustainability. This initiative also raises key questions as to how farmers can play a central role in the transition towards more environmentally sustainable agriculture. And it calls for an increase in agroecological and organic practices. The new Common Agriculture Policy entered into force in January this year. It has significantly higher environmental ambition compared with the past. It provides a combination of obligations for farmers to be able to benefit from CAP support. And it supports more demanding practices, allowing reduced pesticides, the development of organic farming, the creation of new landscape features, and other environmentally friendly agricultural practices. The new regulations, if ambitious, and the new CAP, if implemented correctly, will help the EU respect the commitments made at the Convention on Biological Diversity, COP15, under the new Global Biodiversity Framework. We need to solve the nature crisis in this decade with efforts by everyone, for nature and pollinators, for farmers and for all Europeans. Our farmers are custodians of the land and they are central to this effort. Their futures depend on it and we should listen to their concerns. The debate today will feed into our ongoing reflection. We will present our general conclusions, including the action we intend to take in our communication planned for early April. And I look forward now to an exchange of views. Thank you.
Dankeschön, Frau Kommissar.
Thank you, Commissioner. That brings us on to the first round of the groups. On behalf of the European People's Party, Mr. Dorfmann has the floor.
Danke, Frau Vorsitzende.
Thank you, Thank you. Colleagues, the European Citizens Initiative is an instrument which helps us to have a democracy, and I think it is a good thing that citizens have an opportunity to express their views. And I know how difficult it is to gather 1 million signatures because I worked on a citizens initiative in the past. Protecting bees and biodiversity is obviously something which is of great interest to farmers because many farms require these types of plants. But when working with chemical substances, dangers need to be eliminated. Fewer chemicals is in the interest not only of bees but also of farmers. And also, it's an economic question because these substances cost money. But some people seem to have the impression that farmers just use chemical products because they like them. But we have to look at how they can be replaced. A lot of people who will have signed the initiative want to have ready access to food and at low prices. If we want to reduce the use of chemical substances, then we need to have substitutes. The burden shouldn't be falling on farmers because they have no leeway anymore. We have to ensure that people are willing to pay more, and we see it that at the moment that's simply not the case. We've got inflation, and that means that people aren't buying organic products, and these are now being sold at prices that aren't acceptable for farmers. If people want to buy local products at acceptable price, that would be the best approach. So that would be better than signing an initiative, because then they would be helping both the bees and the farmers in the EU.
Thank you very much, Mr. Dorfmann. Now for the Socialists and Democrats, Mr. Luena.
Thank you, President. Congratulations for this citizens' initiative. I think we all agree the title couldn't be better. But a few things I wanted to point to. Now we're talking about pollinators, ecosystems, and it's very hard for us to not to be able to have long-term agricultural yield if we don't protect those two things. We know that a huge proportion of our food depends on pollinators. Therefore, we have to act. There are two regulations that are currently underway. One is the nature restoration that would have legally binding measures for the member states, and the sustainable use of pesticides regulation. Now, this morning in this debate, we are looking at this subject, but in the subsequent period, we have to really focus on these two types of regulations. There are some points where we don't necessarily agree, and we have to negotiate to be able to save our pollinators, and that means we're going to need to strike an agreement on these two regulations. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now, Mr. Lavacek for the Renew Europe group. You have the floor, sir.
Děkuji, paní předsedkyně.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Protection of bees and other pollinators is essential and important, not just for the environment and biodiversity, but especially for sufficient production of food. One of the solutions is undoubtedly pesticide reduction. Sometimes I hear that farmers love using chemicals. They don't, actually. It doesn't make them happy to work with it, and it costs them a lot of money, but they have to use it. Why? What is the solution then? Less damaging alternatives are being blocked by you. And plants that don't need so much chemicals, and approving new genomic techniques is something that we wait for years. And you who shout that you have to protect bees, you are the ones who block that. So what we need is a solution which is not easy. So, Commissioner, please propose a bee package that will tackle all these problems. Thank you very much.
Dankeschön, Herr Kollege. Und
Thank you very much. Now, on behalf of the Green Group, Ms. Wiener has the floor.
Vielen Dank für die Worterteilung.
Thank you very much for giving me the floor. Colleagues, I'd like to start by thanking those who started this initiative. It's impressive what they've been able to do, particularly against the background of the COVID pandemic. Nonetheless, they were successful and managed to introduce this initiative. But I regret that the people who are responsible for this were not able to participate in today's debate because as people have said, we have seen that climate change, a loss of biodiversity, all of these are linked to our food supplies. chain and of importance for farmers. We need sustainable food change. And so for that reason, we need to talk about transformation, about how we can achieve this. And it is important that we encourage farmers and that we say to them, there are solutions. All of these are available. There are agricultural friendly ways, and these will be more profitable. And so why aren't these methods being used? These methods that work hand in hand with nature, because we need to make people aware of these, because our farmers need to be made independent from these major companies, and they also need to earn more. We have to talk about organic agriculture, and this often has problems. The economic model of one type of farming is destroying the other type. And for that reason, we need to find solutions. I'm not talking about health impacts. You will know that in France and in Italy, Parkinson's disease and other diseases have been declared occupational illnesses for farmers. And they have... we need to have a fact-checking. Please check your mailboxes. You should have got that yesterday by email, and I would ask you to read this very carefully. And I think that we all have to contribute and not delay. We need to take this seriously because we need to act now.
In Wiener als nächstes hatte...
Thank you, Ms. Wiener. Mr. Reusen has the floor for the European Conservatives and Reformist Group.
Dank u wel, voorzitter.
Thank you very much, President, Commissioner, ladies and gentlemen. With this European Citizens Initiative, Save the Bees and the Farmers, there's a justified request to give attention to the pollinators for horticulture and agriculture. More than a third of our crops that go to food is dependent on being pollinated by honeybees and wild bees. When we use plant protection products, we have to look at how this has effects on insects. And that means we have to have a very clear approval procedure and framework and a speeded up approval procedure for low-risk pesticides. The question of phasing out synthetic pesticides by 2035, as the Citizens Initiative is asking for, I think is not very realistic. Plant protection products have to be made available and have to remain available so that they can be used if there are any scourges or diseases that are threatening. So we need a mix of measures. We need integrated plant protection management. We need to invest in robust plants and healthy soil and have precision agriculture as well. But I think the additional stimulation of good initiatives on looking at the legacy for farmers, dealing with, for example, herbaceous borders, and also creating nest possibilities for insects would be useful. But we can only have an integrated approach. That's the only way we can make sure that we help the consumer, we make sure that we still get enough good and healthy food. Thank you.
Kollege Reusser. Fraktion Identität und Demokratie wird durch Herrn Le Breton vertreten. Bitte schön.
Chers collègues, dans le monde...
Colleagues, in the ideal world as described by European citizens as entitled Save Bees and Farmers Towards a Bee-Friendly Agriculture, well, that would mean that farming would not need any pesticides whatsoever, but that is just a dream. By reducing by 80% of synthetic pesticides in the dates that are put forth is unrealistic. That plan would save bees, but not European farming. And if you do not believe me, all you have to do is look to see what is happening with beets in France. And a ECJ ruling has just banned neonicotinoids. Now, we know that this type of synthetic pesticide ban must be done, but it must be done in a sound way with scientific grounds and not based on random data. This will only be able to be done in pace with research that will come up with substitute solutions. New types of genomic studies have some promising ways forward. In the meantime, however, We have to avoid a dogmatic approach or a shift to unrealistic green solutions. We have an international crisis, and therefore the EU must have food autonomy. This will mean that we'll have to continue to use synthetic pesticides there and only when and where necessary.
Dankeschön, Herr Kollege.
Thank you very much. Now for the left group, Ms. Hazekamp has the floor. Go ahead.
Ja, dank u wel, voorzitter.
Thank you very much, President, Madam Commissioner. I'm standing here with mixed feelings. On the one hand, I'm extremely proud that so many people have been mobilized to protect bees and farmers. On the other hand, I'm angry. I'm angry because this European Parliament doesn't see the necessity to have a healthy and safe food system. Bees are being threatened by massive use of agricultural poisons, but if pollinators die out, that'll have catastrophic consequences for nature, but also for the production of our food. Industrial agriculture, which is dependent on poison and synthetic fertilizers, is threatening the future of our planet and all the countryside populations we have. I hear there's a lot of support for the Citizens' Initiative, but in the meantime, the legislation to reduce agricultural poisons is being sabotaged by this Parliament. The quantities of disinformation and scaremongering that we've heard about this piece of legislation can be compared with the attempts by the tobacco industry to take legislation which is necessary to protect people against lung cancer and weakening it and delaying it. The tactics of the agri-industry are comparable. Sowing doubt about cause and effect with the intention of weakening and delaying. I hope that common sense will prevail. We have to act urgently to help bees and get rid of dangerous agricultural poisons. We have to restore nature urgently, and we have to help farmers to transition to sustainable, small-scale, plant-based and healthy food production. Thank you.
Frau Kollegin, als nächstes.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Mr. Giarrusso.
Colleagues, President, it's extremely important for European citizens to have this opportunity to force the European Parliament to discuss bees, which is so fundamental for human life, farming, and the work that bees do in the world. We know that it's worth something around 130 billion a year, and the portion in Europe is important. And therefore, there are four things that we need to do immediately. We need funds to restore a habitat for wildflowers, restructuring the CAP for pollinators and making sure that we repopulate the population where it has fallen, reforming the pesticides regulation to prevent future damage to bees, and making sure also that we look at those plants that are currently being marketed, respect all of these things. Our entire biodiversity is completely at risk. Were we to not do something, that would be absolutely unconscionable. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next speaker will be Mr. Bogovic. You have the floor.
Dear Madam Commissioner, dear colleagues, I come from Slovenia, and I think we can safely say we are a beekeeping country. We have 11,000 beekeepers to our 2 million citizens. We have a wonderful beekeeping organization that prepared the initiative for healthy breakfast. So every third Friday in the month, the young people in our schools know the importance of healthy breakfasts. From 2011 onwards, there were no there was no decline in bees because we are keeping the rules. I also grow fruit. I do use pesticides, and for 30 years, I import bees to my orchard. And the bees come from my son. He is keeping 10 beehives in our orchard every year, and no bees have died so far. So I believe we need to respect rules, we need to keep our regulations, but also ensure farmers can use sorts that are resilient. We need to focus on precise farming and use solutions that have proven to be effective in other agricultural methods, and farmers are already using them. Discussions about doing away with the pesticides in a very short time frame are not good.
Thank you very much. And now Mrs. Aguilera.
Thank you very much, President. Commissioner McGuinness, welcome. Well, I'd like to really begin by congratulating all of those who contributed to the European Citizens Initiative, because it shows the critical spirit that the citizens have, and it's also a request to improve our well-being of all. So congratulations to the authors. This ECI is requesting a ban on synthetic pesticides, restoration of biodiversity, and assisting farmers in this transition. And I don't think anyone would disagree with these objectives. Another thing I'd like to be clear on, by 2035, I'm not sure if this is a realistic possibility, however. Realistic, I say. Now, we need to assist farmers and give them alternatives. We need to guarantee vegetal health, much like human health, food security, affordability of food products. And we have to remember that we are currently undergoing a period of inflation. Therefore, I think this is a good initiative, but we have to remember the entire phasing procedure. Support to farmers. How will we do that? And how can we make sure it's agronomically possible? Because we cannot just shift things to exports. Therefore, I agree with everything, but I think that we have to keep in mind that we can't just look at one side of the balance. How will we support biodiversity? Yes, but how can we support farmers to make it possible? Otherwise, it would just be a simply fiction. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next speaker will be Mr. Heusig. You have the floor.
Vážená pani komisárka.
Madam Commissioner, colleagues, not only scientists but also ordinary citizens have been telling us this very clearly. Dangerous synthetic pesticides, they threaten farmers, bees, but also other pollinators. We have integrated pest management, we have biological farming. All of these methods are well known, but yet not used. Why are they not used? The permits are being prolonged, even though we know that some of these pesticides are known poisons. The Commission grants these exceptions also for known banned neonicotinoids, but these are even granted permits for future, even though we know that there are alternatives. This is also the case in Slovakia. The farmers don't know about these alternatives. What we lack is independent advice. And the alternatives, they are being really blocked. We expect the Commission to change their attitude. We expect that these poisons will disappear from our fields. Thank you.
The next speaker will be Mr. Grufer. You have the floor.
Madame la Présidente.
Thank you very much, Madam President, Madam Commissioner. Ladies and gentlemen, 1.2 million citizens from across Europe are crying out in despair because of the terrible agricultural model. Just rushing around like headless chickens is not going to help. Let's just look at the problems that we're facing. Obviously, without farmers, there won't be any agriculture, but without pollinators, there won't be any agriculture either. The biomass of flying insects has dropped by 76% on average across Europe, 82% last summer alone. Robots replacing bees, is that the future that you want for our children? It's up to the Commission to make sure that this is stopped, and they take their responsibilities by strictly applying the European Court of Justice ruling on the ban on neonicotinoids across Europe. Yes, to do things differently is possible. The IPM work system was here last session in plenary that showed that we can reduce pesticide use by 50%. Integrated pesticide use is possible, and we need to have a different policy in Commission and in Parliament. So let's stop serving the interests of industry and listen to the people of Europe.
Merci. So.
Thank you very much. Mrs. Zalewska will be the next speaker.
Madam President, Commissioner, I'm very happy for the title of this debate, and I hope that the Commissioner will be looking at the program in such a way, so holistically, because the initiative, which was supported by 1 million of signatures, because who would not love bees? But unfortunately, it's a one-sided approach. I come from Poland, and we have had bees for hundreds of years. We know how to take care of them. Let me start with this. When looking at the problem, one should perhaps follow those who have good results already, although they do apply plant protection products nonetheless. Of course, money is required not only for small farmers. Thanks to Polish Commissioner, Mr. Wojciechowski, there is support to apiaries, small ones and big ones, and conflicts must be avoided among farmers and those who move out into the countryside and go live in the country then. And I'm very happy this is the subject we're debating today. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The next speaker will be Mrs. Guidoni.
Grazie, Presidente, onorevoli.
Thank you, President, colleagues. Commissioner, we're speaking of bees today, and that means that we are talking about our very lives. Without bees, many crops would not be able to produce fruit and seeds, putting at risk our biodiversity. Without biodiversity, our health and food security will be at risk. Our farmers are very well cognizant of all of this. They are the ones that are the stewards of the environment. No one can do that better than them, because no one knows nature better than them, its cycles, its rules, and therefore the best way to respect all of that. Thanks to their daily commitment, farmers are guaranteeing a protection of biodiversity. A good example is those who work in mountainous regions that are extremely complex. It is through farming and farmers that we are able to maintain all of this alive. Many communities depend on them fully and continue to live thanks to them. To sum up, this means that environmental sustainability is intrinsically linked to economic and social sustainability. We must support those who work the land and produce excellent products. That is the best possible way for us to defend our future and our children's future. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you. The next speaker will be Mrs. Konečná.
Thank you very much, Chair. Commissioner, colleagues. The Czech Republic, with 8 bee colonies per square kilometre, sees the highest bee population density in the world. But the last several years have been catastrophic. In the winter times, there are frosts and thaws in quick succession. Bees are disoriented. If the temperature outside is above 10 degrees, they start flying, they freeze and die. Yes, pollinators are being threatened by chemicals. Poisoned colonies are not a rarity, not anymore, even in the Czech Republic. But pesticides are not the only and definitely not the greatest problem of beekeepers these days. Pollinators are threatened by droughts, landscape devastation, insufficient pollen variety, different structures of agricultural production or crop rotation, and we have to remember diseases as well. So we have to adopt a complex set of measures. I am very happy that we have now this 7th very successful European initiative, and I hope that it will not meet the same fate as the previous initiatives. I hope that the Commission will actually do something this time. But let's approach this complex issue complexly. By doing just one thing, we won't solve anything. Thanks.
Fort mit Herrn Kollegen Buda.
Thank you. The next speaker will be Mr. Buda.
Doamnă președintă, mulțumesc, doamna comisar, doamnelor și domnilor colegi. Salutăm.
Thank you very much, President, Commissioner. We welcome the concerns expressed in the Citizens' Initiative. There are hundreds of plants that are 90% of our agriculture, and a large part of them require pollination by bees. And so it's a very important point for the future of agriculture. We need to protect bees for agriculture and also for food security. And we're told that in 2020 there was an increase in the bee population. In Romania, there was an increase of approximately 10%. So there was an increase in bee colonies, even if pesticides are being used. If things are done in a rational and sensible way, the proposals which are being made suggest a reduction of the use of pesticides. But that's not something that we can do with the percentage of 80% by 2030. We use 650 grams per hectare, and then in the Netherlands it's higher, and so we can't reduce in the same way. And we also need impact assessment, and we need to give farmers an alternative. Thank you very much, Mr. Adjus Saliba.
Thank you. The European Citizens' Initiative is a very important tool for participatory democracy of our citizens, and this helps them have a central way to have decision-making procedures. And this initiative on the protection of bees is extremely important. In light of this initiative, I would like to emphasize another problem that we might have not mentioned, and bees in Europe are facing, especially in the Mediterranean region. I'm talking about oriental hornets that is destroying bees and causing a lot of problems in biodiversity in many member states, including Malta and also Italy. Therefore, it is extremely important to have initiatives such as this European Citizens' Initiative so that we can take action at a European Union level in order to address problems that need urgent remedies. For example, by helping our farmers to eliminate the problem of the oriental hornets. It is also important to address other problems such as climate change. For example, due to drought in Malta 2 years ago, we had 80% less honey production in 1 year. Therefore, I think it is important to address these problems, because without bees we do not eat. Without bees our biodiversity will end. Thank you.
Ganz herzlichen Dank, Herr Kollege.
Thank you very much. The next speaker will be Mrs. Rees.
Madam President, Madam Commissioner, more than 1 million Europeans, citizens of Europe, have demanded that we save the bees and the farmers. We must listen to them. And there are 3 things that are important that they're saying to change reality. Phase out synthetic pesticides by 2035. Now, to be frank, I'm not sure if we'll achieve that, but reducing our dependence on pesticides is self-evident. In a previous resolution on pollinators in 2019, we asked for that. There is a proposal from the Commission on the table to cut by half chemical pesticides by 2030. The Parliament has to stop filibustering and start working. The second demand is supporting farmers. Now, that's obvious. In financial terms, yes, but also by making sure that there's a massive development of alternatives through chemical fertilizers. The third demand, which is essential, is restore pollinator populations. That's essential. Now, we can see that there's change in soils, intensive farming methods, parasites, climate change. The fight to save our bees is a global fight. We need to change course, and that's what the petitioners are asking.
Dankeschön, Frau Kollegin.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Rees. And now, Mrs. Depane Grunenberg, you have the floor.
Frau Vorsitzende, als erstes.
President, first of all, perhaps we could, you could, Mr. Le Breton just talked about a green Ayatollah, and I think we need to make sure that this is noted and that the response is appropriate. Now, bees are much more than honey. They are actually the basis of our life, and they make sure that we have plants and food. And if we don't have food, we have no agriculture and or food security. With bees dying out, we're losing 2/3 of our apple harvest. And how serious does it have to get? Pesticides kill bees. They damage our environment. And it's a very short-term approach. But without pollinators, you can't have food. You can't have agriculture. And we're working on the reduction of pesticides, and halving by 2030 has to be the absolute minimum. And that is what citizens are calling for. Thank you.
Den von Ihnen angesprochenen Sachverhalt.
The comment that you said, these expressions were used yesterday in the debate yesterday, and there was no comment made on it by the head of your group. And so we will be taking the approach that we decided. The next speaker will be Mr. Jurgiel.
I would like to thank us all for the support for the Citizens' Initiative. We should also add to the title the aspect of guaranteeing safe and secure food to consumers. 80% of our crops depend on pollinators. This means that farmers and beekeepers constitute one coherent community. They need to cooperate. Taking into account all the initiatives that have been taken, I invite us to undertake work on a directive which would aim at introducing good farming practices and a reduction in the application of aggressive pesticides. We need to support pollinators. We need to establish parts of fields which would be left set aside in order to provide refuge to animals and insects. We need also to work harder on combating insects and parasites that decimate bees. I believe that we need to support the cooperation between farmers and beekeepers.
Thank you very much. Mrs. Limmer next.
Schauen wir uns einmal.
Well, let's just look at what the alliances behind the European Citizens Initiative movers. You've got dozens of political lobby groups behind this, bio-labels, serious activators, or Extinction Rebellion, left-wing extremists, people with questionable backgrounds, or Pan Germany NGO. Their pesticide atlas has been called a reference work. Mr. Wiener, one of your foundations on the Save the Bees and Farmers is also involved here. And the biomarketing online has been questioned because there are questions of political influence here. Were we not just talking about problems with lobbyism and how we dealt with it? Now, without plant protection measures, we have drastic reductions in yields. Of course, they're using things like dying bees, and they're always going to capture headlines by doing that. But it's not helping citizens at all. Really, what the problem is money. And here we can see where the problem really lies. And our task is not to make people feel good, it's to ensure that food security can be provided.
Wir fahren fort mit Herrn Kollegen.
Thank you. The next speaker will be Mr. Zoido Alvarez.
President, Commissioner McGuinness, every time that this House discusses farming, and in this case based on an ECI on saving bees and farmers, what we usually are trying to do is to save farmers, but actually it seems like they want to just completely go back to the starting point, everything that we've achieved in some 10 years. And we've seen that we've been able to reduce our pesticide use significantly by using innovative technology and precision farming. Why? Because farmers want to spend less on PPPs, and they want to make sure also that they are protecting biodiversity, so important for their survival. In the EPP, we support this. We would like to continue to improve the quality of our products and our agriculture system in Europe. But we need to be able to feed some 450 million people, and some outside of Europe. So before we make any decision that would put at risk our food security, we need to have affordable, realistic solutions and enough time such that farmers can adapt. We also will need impact assessments on the socio-economic fallout of any measures that we take. Now, over the course of decades, we have protected farmers. Let us continue to do that, and let's continue to support them. Thank you.
Dankeschön, Herr Kollege. Und wir fahren fort mit
Thank you very much. The next speaker will be Mrs. Arena. You have the floor. Thank you very much, President. With the link between the destruction of pollinators and the use of synthetic pesticides is clear, and there is a consensus by scientists. And we've been highlighting these dangers for decades, the dangers for our ecosystems and for food security. And those who say that if we don't use pesticides, we'll have problems, I'd call on you to read the scientific reports, which say quite the opposite. This initiative is the echo of what scientists have been saying for years. And so for that reason, it's very welcome here in Parliament. It has been said there are alternative methods, and it's when these methods are used, they are able to reduce by 80% the use of pesticides. And so let us help farmers to use these alternatives. But we need an ambitious text on the reduction. We need the text now before it's too late. Thank you. Thank you very much. And the next speaker will be Mr. Wietzig.
Zachraňme včely a farmári.
Save bees and farmers, that's a very accurate title, representing yet another successful citizens' initiative focused on the environment. It's also about saving farmers too. The practices that we are supporting are destroying bees, exterminating life in the countryside, and the very assets of farming. We have to talk about how many and which pesticides need to be phased out. Let's not argue whether it's necessary or not. Let's rather speak about how much and what kind of land is necessary to be regenerated. Let us look for ways how to educate farmers and facilitate them in their transition to organic farming. I think that we have a beautiful weekend ahead of us, flowers, snowdrops, bees, and the like. So enjoy this spring magic and ponder on why and where this is happening, because where bees thrive, also people thrive. Let's save the bees and the farmers. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And the next speaker will be Mr. Weitz. You have the floor.
Thank you, Madam President, Commissioner.
Thousands of beekeepers, the losses of honeybees, many of them losses towards pesticides, are replaced year by year. But wild pollinators tested in German environmentally protected areas show up to 16 different pesticides. We have a massive decline of wild pollinators. And while farmers have developed a lot of strategies to massively reduce the use of pesticides, some here in the House still have not understood which direction we are going. The future of agriculture is one that works with nature and not against nature. So to put it clear for everyone to understand, no nature, no farmers, no food. Thank you.
Dankeschön, Herr Kollege. Als nächstes fährt fort Herr Kollege.
Thank you very much. Mr. Kuchmiuk is next. You have the floor.
Thank you, Madam President, Commissioner. The title of this debate is adequate to the problem because bees are responsible for 1/3 of the world production of food, so they are necessary in the process of production in agriculture. On the other hand, one should also remember about farmers, their future as well, because over the last 10 years, we lost 3 million farms in the European Union. We should approach this problem reasonably, not with radical solutions, because that's unnecessary. Let me remind you that the proposals put on the table by the Commission with cutting pesticide use, they are unacceptable. Mr. Buda spoke about it already. It cannot be the case that if you have very different levels of use of pesticides, then cutting by 50% across the board, it's not defendable. And that was what was proposed by the Commission. We need support for apiaries, for beekeeping, precise farming, and common sense on top of that. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. The next speaker will be Mrs. Bruna.
Madame la Présidente, merci. Pour sauver les abeilles et les agriculteurs.
To save bees and farmers, and I would also add consumers, we need to regulate pesticides. With the agroecological solutions, for example, rotating crops to avoid pest development and to make sure that there are the right kinds of predators, to use pesticides that are organic to avoid pests and to fight insects or as well as mushrooms and fungi. These things are possible and also pursuant to the revised CAP. Will we have enough funds, however, for our farmers? I put the question, and the reply was unfortunate. According to the CAP, that will very much depend on the commitment of member states. We have to state that those who are the most virtuous, environmentally speaking, are not receiving the economic support, and yet we know that their systems depend on it.
Thank you very much. The next speaking will be Mrs. Sander. You have the floor. President, Commissioner, yes, it is true that bees are essential for life on Earth and for maintaining biodiversity, and we need to mobilize to stop their decline and reverse the trend. And we reformed the Common Agricultural Policy and allocated additional resource to the bee sector. I would also like to welcome all of the initiatives which are being undertaken locally. I'm thinking of what happens here in Alsace. There are many initiatives which are closely involving the world of agriculture to work together with beekeepers and test new ways of working. As legislator, we need to be realistic, and we need to admit that we will not change all of the industrial agricultural policies and human activities so quickly. We're not simply going to click our fingers and change the system, but we need to think together, and I would stress together, about practical measures. They need to be feasible. We need to protect biodiversity and protect bees. This calls for research, innovation, new technologies. But, ladies and gentlemen, colleagues, it is important that we involve all stakeholders and involve farmers with us. It can't be something which is done against them, and I think we all need to be aware of that. Thank you very much.
Muito bom dia a todos. Good morning, everyone. Commissioner, good morning. The next speaker is Carmen Avram for 1 minute.
Salut această inițiativă cetățenească și pe cei.
I'd like to welcome this citizens' initiative, having garnered more than 1 million signatures. There are concerns for pollinators, but we also have to look at inconsistencies amongst the European institutions. For example, there's a proposal for nature restoration to protect pollinators. At the same time, however, there's an attempt to conclude the biggest trade agreement in Mercosur. Are people aware that in Argentina, the bees are being destroyed the most of any country, or that pesticides are being reduced without any alternatives for farmers? Does the Commission know that in Brazil, over 10 years, there's been a doubling of the use of pesticides? The Romanian farmers know how important bees are, and that's why they don't use a lot of pesticides. At the same time, there are 3 million tons of unsold cereal that they had, and their recompense for that is modest at best. So we need to protect the farmers, and we need healthy food. And if you share those opinions, you should act accordingly. Thank you.
Muito obrigado.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Walter Flego for 1 minute, please.
Hvala vam lijepo.
Thank you. What kind of agriculture do we need, and what kind of agriculture must the public sector support? What kind of agriculture do we lack in Europe? Well, we lack organic agriculture, and this is something that the citizens are aware of. So, dear colleagues, in the whole of our agriculture, we have to take the path that we have taken in Istria, and that means supporting local products. Of course, this will reduce the use of pesticides and antibiotics, and this will reinforce small agricultural businesses. We need to provide financial support to farmers for organic agriculture. And believe me, if we do that, agriculture will be able to function on the market as well, and nature and our consumers will be thankful because we will have protected their health. This is our responsibility, and therefore I expect all of your support to this kind of thinking. Thank you.
Mr. Flego, you've got a blue card from Mr. Sokol. Do you accept it? Of course. So, Mr. Sokol, you've got the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Flego. I listened carefully to your statement, and I agree with you that European agriculture must be based on organic farming. We need to support the citizens who, through this initiative, want to secure safe food. But given the economic insecurities and the inflation and high prices,